Incredible discovery. Gunslinger unveils hidden love in China, inspiring hope with a surprising letter. Hank Taylor's heart thudded against his ribs as he tore through the envelope. A half-sister? He muttered, feeling the weight of his past crashing into the present like a freight train. Who would have thought that a simple letter could unravel a lifetime of buried secrets? He barely recognized his own emotions stirring beneath his calloused exterior. Curiosity, resentment, a flicker of hope, all grappling for dominance. A fragile family connection intruded upon the solitary life he had so carefully carved out in his small Texas town. The dusty garage felt like a cage, the scent of motor oil mixing with the bitterness rising within him. He had enough demons to wrestle with. His gunslinging days brought long shadows, ones he thought he had left behind. But now, the fading memories of a mother's love collided with the reality of a sister he never knew existed. The jagged knife of doubt twisted deeper. Could he really step into a world of bright colors and bustling streets, far from the isolation he found comforting? His mechanic's hands trembled, gripping the letter as he struggled to comprehend the implications. Family values meant everything to him, a lesson seared into his heart by his mother's unwavering dedication. But what did family mean in this foreign context, where an unknown sibling waited for him across the globe? As he packed his worn suitcase, each article felt heavier, his mind racing with anxiety. Was he prepared to confront not only the siblings he never met, but also the ghosts of decisions made long ago? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The flight from Texas to China loomed like a long highway without end, filled with dread and longing. With every mile traced on the map, Hank wrestled with that gnawing question. What if he faced rejection instead of acceptance? The din of the airplane blended with his rambling thoughts, creating a melody of self-doubt. The vivid images of Beijing, the city that pulsed with energy, felt intimidating. How would he fit in? Would they even see him as family? When he landed, the vibrant chaos of the city squeezed his heart in ways he couldn't comprehend. The sights, sounds, and smells enveloped him, challenging his perception of home and family. Meeting May felt unreal, their shared lineage standing like a wall between them, each brick a question he was afraid to ask. As she revealed their ancestral home, a dilapidated property rich with history, but plagued by a ruthless developer's intent, it became more than just a building. It was a connection, a desperate lifeline to a past he hadn't known existed. With her by his side, the urgency clashed against his internal dread. This land, ravaged by their family's silence, bore the weight of their fractured identities. Despite her determination, Hank felt the cold grip of doubt tighten around him. Could he truly rise to defend their shared legacy? Or was he destined to retreat into the sanctuary of solitude he had known for so long? The question hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. As the days drew closer to the pivotal meeting with developers looming like storm clouds overhead, despair mingled with nascent hope, a war raging inside him. Hank's thoughts spiraled like the streets of Beijing, questioning whether he could stand against the world to protect not just a home, but the binds of family he had never fully understood. Would embracing May mean finally confronting the pieces of himself he had buried deep within Texas soil? In that moment, the stakes had never been higher, and Hank knew this was only the beginning. Discovered sisterhood. The shadows of self. Hank stood before May's ancestral home, the sun casting sharp angles across the crumbling facade. The dilapidated building felt like a mirror, reflecting the chaos of his internal struggle. Both were relics of a past begging for revival. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to step closer, each footfall a reluctant stride into the unknown. The weight of centuries rested upon his shoulders, and he could almost hear the whispers of the memories that lingered. Would he become the hero of this story, or the antagonist of his own? "Are you ready?" May's voice sliced through his reverie, a reminder of the imminent meeting with the developers threatening their legacy. It should have grounded him, yet her question only heightened the cacophony inside his mind. The stakes were high, their family home was on the brink of obliteration, and the thrill of the fight felt strange, yet invigorating. "Ready as I'll ever be," Hank replied, forcing a confidence into his tone. But could he muster the courage to defend something so intricately tied to family, something he had only just learned about? The apprehension gnawed at him, each heartbeat amplifying his uncertainties. As they ventured inside, shadows danced off the cracked walls, echoing tales of laughter and sorrow embedded in the very foundation. He traced his fingers along the worn wood, feeling a connection deep within. This was no longer just a structure. It was a symbol of kinship he had yearned for yet feared would slip away again. "Hank, I need you with me on this," May said, the resolve glistening in her eyes. The intensity of her gaze pulled him from his thoughts, igniting something deep within him. Suddenly, the battle between retreat and resilience felt tangible. If these developers get their way, we lose everything. A flicker of determination ignited in Hank's gut. Was this the shift he needed? Could the fight for May's family legacy awaken something dormant inside him? As he looked into her eyes, he saw the embodiment of hope and desperation, and something within him began to awaken. "Let's do it then," he declared, driven by an unexpected surge of purpose. Each word felt like a stepping stone laid before him, a path diverging away from the isolation he had known. He might not have known her long, but the bond they were forging felt profound and urgent. The meeting wasn't just a discussion of property, it was a collision of identities. Images of his past entwined with the future he envisioned. Would he lose himself in this confrontation, or find a new version of himself? That question tinged every syllable in his head as they prepared to meet the developers. In the conference room, sleek and sterile, Hank's heart raced. The polished table felt cold beneath his palms as he and May faced a group of sharp-suited individuals whose intentions were as clear as the glass windows surrounding them. Each development proposal was a bullet aimed at the heart of his newly discovered heritage. "Before you consider demolishing this property, consider the family it represents," May began, her voice steady. Hank marveled at her courage, stealing strength from her unwavering stance. But the developers were relentless, their words cloaked in corporate tact. "Understand this," one said. "This land is ripe for development, it's just business." A fire ignited within Hank. This wasn't just business. It was his sister's history, and now his too. The fusion of their stories felt like a flame ready to consume all doubts that had plagued him. He could no longer remain the passive observer in his life. "Then why not consider preserving that history?" he interjected, breaking the illusion of politeness. The abruptness of his own confrontation shocked him. The tension mounted, a palpable pulse thrumming through the room as he faced the developers head-on. Would he find the strength to sustain this newly kindled resolve? Or would the shadows of his past overshadow his fight? The moment hung in the air like an unbroken silence, a fragile thread connecting past and present. Hank knew one thing: he was on the precipice of transformation. Standing there, ready to face personal demons while fighting for family, he realized the battle wasn't just for a home. It was for his very identity. How far would he go to defend that new version of himself? As the developers shifted uncomfortably, Hank caught May's eye, a spark of synergy passing between them. The unyielding bond of shared history demanded to be honored, yet uncertainty lurked, whispering doubts. Was he truly ready for the next phase? The unraveling tension in the room pointed toward the impending confrontation. What would it take for Hank to abandon the shadows of his past entirely and embrace his new path? As voices raised around him, signaling the true conflict to come, Hank felt the very pulse of his existence sharpen, standing at the edge of discovery and disaster. Hank's heart thundered in his chest, a rhythmic reminder of his own fragility in this confrontation. He could feel the palpable tension weave through the air like an unseen thread, pulling him toward the precipice of his new reality. The developers may have seen a piece of land, but for Hank and May, this was a legacy filled with vibrant histories and emotions demanding recognition. As May passionately outlined their vision of preserving the home as a cultural heritage site, each phrase resonated deep within Hank. He listened intently, not just to her words, but to the surge of emotion that pulsed through her speech, mirroring the feelings that stirred in him. Memories of fleeting moments with family, laughter around dinner tables, and unvoiced stories lingered in the background of his mind, reinforcing the stakes growing higher with each passing second. But the developers leaned in, their condescending smirk sharpening the air. "This is an excellent attempt at emotional manipulation," one of them sneered, his tone dripping with appraising dismissal. Hank felt his heart sink momentarily, a wave of doubt crashing over him. Had they really prepared for this battle, or were they constructing an edifice of hope on a crumbling foundation? May turned to Hank, the frustration flickering in her eyes. "You wanted to be part of this. Now's the time to stand up." Her challenge reignited the flame inside him. He had come too far to waver now. The stillness broke as he shifted forward, gathering his thoughts into a cohesive volley. "Emotional? Perhaps. But what you dismiss as emotional is rooted in authenticity. A family isn't just a name. It's a story. A foundation not measured in square footage, but in generations." It felt good to speak, the words slipping free infused with furious conviction. Each syllable dripped with meaning as he began to assert not just his beliefs, but his identity. The room oscillated with uncertainty, and for the first time Hank sensed doubt in the faces across from him. "We're not arguing the soil beneath our feet, we're defending lives intertwined with it," he continued, his voice steadying with rising momentum. "A few more dollars on a spreadsheet aren't worth erasing the stories that weave this space together. This isn't a negotiation, it's a reckoning." A flicker of surprise crossed the developer's expressions, and Hank drank it in, realizing this was the exact reinvention he had yearned for, a courageous stand driven by personal stakes. Yet the other shoe had yet to drop. A woman at the end of the row spoke up with a caustic edge to her words. "You don't understand the implications here. This isn't just about your nostalgia. It's about significant economic development. We can't allow sentimentality to shape business decisions." Hank felt exposed, stripped of the emotional armor he'd fashioned. But then something shifted, a clarity settling in his mind. This woman wasn't just an antagonist. She represented a future that could silence his newfound voice. She clawed at him to retreat, but retreating was no longer an option. He noticed May's expression had hardened. She was ready for this fight. For the first time, Hank related to the elemental stakes of conflict. He began to see their struggle as a microcosm of a larger fight within himself, a battle against that lingering isolation, that stifling shame of being unworthy of belonging. "I may not have the years surrounding this place that you do, but I have a heart that feels its pulse." A murmur rippled through the room. Hank's eyes flicked to May, who nodded gently, her implied encouragement igniting his resolve further. He had no desire to retreat into silence any longer. Through this act of solidarity with her, it came to him with a vivid epiphany. They stood together. Would their bond endure in the face of opposition? Suddenly it dawned on him that this was more than a mere confrontation for property rights. It was an unveiling of a new self, liberated from the restraints of his past. "You might see it as just a business transaction," Hank pressed on, now feeling emboldened. "But we see it as home. It's a fight worth more than money, and it's fueled by our desire for connection, a connection you cannot observe in financial statements. We are not done yet." In that moment he felt the juxtaposition of fear and exhilaration. They began to meld into a new sense of purpose. What had started as uncertain steps toward a fight against corporate indifference transformed into an affirmation of who he could become. Just then the atmosphere thickened, tension unraveling a thread of anxiety that loomed around them. Hank faced the developers with renewed vigor, his identity fusing into the fire of the exchange. But as the meeting wore on, he sensed that the real battle lay not just outside the conference room walls, but within the confines of his own heart. Would he truly uncover the courage needed to defend something so profoundly linked to his spirit? As anger simmered in their opponents, Hank could almost feel the ground beneath him shifting. The fight was far from over. But at what cost would his newfound identity emerge victorious? Would he discover within himself the fortitude to uphold his promises to May? The answers beckoned just beyond the horizon, closer and more vital than they had been, and yet, lurking behind the overall resolve was a question that lingered, an unquenched uncertainty. How far would he go to protect not just a building, but the essence of the person he was becoming? The urgency of the impending confrontation loomed before him, urging Hank onward into the next phase of his unpredictable journey. The meeting dragged on, an agonizing interplay of raised voices and scornful retorts. Hank's pulse quickened as he remained ensconced in his resolute stance. Each glance from May rekindled a protective instinct. The stakes were high, but he felt the thrill of belonging surging through his veins. He was more than a participant in this confrontation. He was a force of change, an embodiment of the history they fought to retain. Hank drew a deep breath, channeling his frustration into clarity. What we're asking for isn't just preservation, it's recognition. Recognition that can drive community spirit and loyalty far deeper than short-lived profits can. His words were deliberate, each one rousing a flicker of connection within the audience, at least from the few who didn't revel in dismissing him. The lead developer leaned back, arms crossed with a condescending smile. Charming. Sentimentality at its finest. Don't you understand that this city is evolving? You're pining for a dream that doesn't exist anymore. For a moment, doubt crashed over Hank again, threatening to cloud his passion. Was his yearning for connection just misplaced nostalgia? He quickly banished the thought, his resolve hardening. It's precisely that evolution that demands a foundation of our roots. We should not have to sacrifice our stories for your ambitions. May's profile inspired him as he spoke. He recalled the countless hours she'd dedicated to highlighting their shared heritage, emphasizing that their efforts would not only reclaim their home, but ignite something transformative in the community. Community. The concept echoed in his mind as he pieced together a vision beyond mere preservation. The developer scoffed. You're dreaming, Hank. Emotions don't pay the bills. Each statement felt like an arrow aimed at his confidence, but he sensed a shift. Their earlier bravado flickered like a flame caught in the wind. Maybe not, he conceded, but passion can drive it. Imagine turning this land into a cultural hub, one that celebrates diversity and resonates with people, drawing them in rather than shutting them out. We're here to demonstrate there's value beyond the ledger. There exists a wealth of memories, experiences, and identity. With every word, he tore away the veneer the developers had woven around them. For the first time, he saw glimmers of doubt in their eyes. Hank leaned forward, driven by a newfound purpose he had never expected to uncover. He wasn't just advocating for an idea. He was carving out his own narrative amid a sea of indifference, a fiercer, bolder identity filled with purpose. Your framework may be built on economics, he argued, but what are economics without humanity? The future demands a balance, one that we can offer through this legacy instead of obliterating it. Silence followed his proclamation, thick and heavy. Han's heart raced, a cocktail of anticipation and anxiety swirling in his chest. The developers squirmed, their confidence wavering. Then, the woman who had questioned him before interjected, her nostrils flaring slightly as if inhaling the raw energy he exuded. Even if you are right, how do you expect to fund such a hub? You lack resources, networks, the foundational support that matters. Hank felt the weight of her skepticism, but instead of retreating, he felt a spark of aggression rise within him. What I lack in resources, I make up for in vision. Together, May and I can transform unspoken connections into a living legacy. He turned to May, who nodded softly, her trust invigorating him further. They were in this together, facing an uncertain future, but equipped with renewed identity and shared purpose. Tension mounted around the table. He felt eyes on him, scrutinizing yet intrigued. The silence turned into an opportunity, a moment ripe for harnessing. Not only is this project economically viable, but it also offers an emotional value that resonates with everyone in this city. You want an investment? Imagine a thriving community space, solidarity, invigorating relationships, a foundation worth its weight in stories. Yet even as defiance fueled his speech, an inkling of doubt pricked at him. The fear of failure loomed, fleeting visions of insignificance clouding his resolve. Would they see the strength of his passion? As murmurs arose among the developers, Hank's thoughts spiraled into action. How could he ensure they recognized this possibility? Time was against them. Every second spent in hesitation felt like sand slipping through their fingers. Turning to May, he stole glances at her radiant expression. She believed in their mission, a fire mirrored in her eyes. For the first time, he realized that he had a new weapon, a connection with her that could cultivate hope amid uncertainty. They weren't just battling for a piece of land. They were igniting the flame of community hope, a calling beyond the project itself. As Hank faced the calculating expressions of the developers, he recognized the fragile line between fear and determination, but which would dominate in the face of their indifference? Every heartbeat propelled him forward, teetering on the precipice of a decision that would define his evolution. An overlooked cue from May caught his attention. The meeting was escalating. Would their united front withstand this ultimate test? The clock was ticking, and beneath the surface of his resolve, the question loomed. Could he galvanize their fight against the encroaching tide of corporate indifference before it swept everything away? Hank's heart thundered as he observed the developers' expressions shift from skepticism to burgeoning interest. This was the moment. Fueled by an adrenaline rush, he seized the opportunity. "You're right to question us," he said, punctuating his statement with a pointed finger. "But that's where the challenge lies. This is not just about money. It's a challenge to the very framework of how we perceive value." The lead developer leaned forward, intrigued despite himself, his earlier condescension replaced with a hint of curiosity. Hank took a deep breath, aligning his thoughts with the urgency of the moment. "Let's pivot our focus," he pressed. "What if we approach this not just as a financial investment but as a cultural imperative? A chance to redefine success in a city that craves identity." As the murmurs swelled, Hank's gaze flicked towards May. She sat poised, her resolve evident in the subtle tilt of her chin. Their shared vision began to transform the atmosphere. He had always viewed her as a partner, but in these tense moments, it became clear that they were co-creators of their future. Despite the looming threat of corporate interests, he realized they held a power neither had acknowledged, a vision driven by deep-rooted values. "Imagine this," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "A public space that not only tells the stories of the past but inspires new narratives. Interactive installations, workshops, cultural festivals, engaging the city's diverse population and creating a new revenue stream through tourism and local partnerships." He articulated vibrant images of artists and storytellers weaving their expressions into the fabric of the community, simultaneously stirring pride and economic interest. Each phrase brought the developers closer, breaking down barriers as they envisioned his ideas taking root. Yet, doubt still lingered in the corners of Hank's mind. Had he overestimated their readiness for change? His memories of past failures crept uneasily into his awareness, threatening to undermine his present conviction. Would he be dismissed once more, left to reap the bitterness of another untenable dream? But before he could spiral, he grounded himself in his purpose. "We have the opportunity to set a precedent," he declared, his voice steady. "By merging history with innovation, we're creating not just a space but a symbol. One that resonates beyond profit margins, something that speaks to our humanity." The lead developer, now more leader than adversary, stroked his chin, considering. "And where do we start? You say you have the vision, but it's going to take more than mere conviction to navigate the politics of our city." Hope and trepidation intertwined within Hank. It was a dialogue, not a battle, and therein lay a chance for true progress. Returning the developer's gaze, he shared a calculated smile. "We build partnerships, gather stories from those who feel erased, leverage local businesses, involve schools. There's an undeniable energy waiting to be lit." The sound of the clock ticking echoed in his ears, rhythmic yet ominous. Questions hung unresolved in the air. He could vividly picture the developers gathering information, dissecting thoughts born from their initial skepticism. Hank felt himself standing at a crossroads, the winds of change either blowing toward him or against him. "Let's arrange a workshop," the lead developer offered, raising an eyebrow. "We'll bring in local stakeholders and explore this idea further. If it's viable, we can consider your approach." Hank felt a flush of triumph ripple through him. They had taken a crucial step, but in the back of his mind simmered the awareness that this moment was a mere beginning, not an end. He wasn't yet out of the woods. The workshop could either solidify his vision or further entrench their existing apathy. As he glanced sideways at May, her eyes sparkled with optimism, and for a fleeting instant he felt infused with unwavering confidence. Their journey was about to intensify in complexity, fraught with challenges he could hardly imagine. But what if this workshop opens doors he wasn't prepared for? A quiet voice in him whispered. His resolve flickered, casting shadows on the promise of success. The meeting adjourned, and as the developers filed out, Hank caught one last look at May. They had ignited a spark, but would it be enough? Would their efforts to redefine this legacy cast a light strong enough to overcome the looming corporate shadows threatening to obscure their dreams? His breath caught in his throat. The challenge was far from over, and he couldn't shake the feeling that another test awaited just beyond the horizon, one that would force him to confront the very core of what he was willing to fight for. Would he have the fortitude to face it when the stakes were raised even higher? Hank barely slept that night, his mind racing with possibilities and hidden fears. The words exchanged with the developers echoed in his consciousness, transforming into a whirlwind of potential. The workshop, a beacon of hope or another potential pitfall? He could barely ignore the anxiety threatening to breach the surface of his newfound confidence. Just after sunrise, he found himself pacing his small apartment, rehearsing his pitch to the future stakeholders. There was a palpable desperation to succeed clawing at him. He envisioned their faces, the subtle cues of boredom, skepticism, or even impatience. Each potential reaction caused his stomach to churn as he mentally prepared for their inquiries. He paused to glance at May's text from the previous night, a simple affirmation of belief. "We can do this, Hank. You're ready." The message ignited a flicker of determination within him. Yet the weight of responsibility hung heavier than ever. What if he failed? What if all this ended in ridicule? As he prepared for the day ahead, he sought to etch into his mind the narratives he wanted to evoke during the workshop. Creating a dialogue was tantamount to finding that pivotal moment of connection where visions could converge. The challenge would lie in navigating the complex dynamics of different stakeholders, how to align diverse perspectives with a singular mission. His thoughts shifted to the developers. Would they genuinely embrace this shared narrative? Or were they merely placating him, eager to distance themselves from responsibility while basking in the facade of collaboration? Hank squashed the cynical thoughts before they could gain traction. No more self-doubt. He would walk into that workshop as a leader, not just a dreamer. Stepping into the venue, the energy buzzed in the air. Hank's pulse quickened as he took in the gathering of stakeholders. Each face bore a story, and he felt an instinctual pull to tap into that collective consciousness. But just as quickly, self-doubt clouded his clarity. They would expect results, strategies, and actionable insights. He took a breath, grounding himself in the moment. May arrived by his side, her presence soothing the storm inside him. Without a word exchanged, their synergy spoke volumes. Two hearts aligned with a singular goal. Together, they approached the front, ready to ignite inspiration. The workshop commenced, Hank expertly guiding the conversation beyond technical updates and budget constraints. He urged participants to envision the transformative power they could wield, using storytelling as a foundation. Their collective experiences intertwined beautifully, framing the community's struggles while simultaneously highlighting resilience. As discussions flourished, Hank dodged remarks that served only as critiques of feasibility, redirecting the energy toward possibilities. He discovered he could not only address concerns, but also navigate tough questions with a proactive approach that surprised him. Listening deeply and responding with empathy brought him unexpected moments of revelation, both for himself and the stakeholders. Strikingly, He unearthed the personal stories embedded within the gathering, revealing shared dreams and aspirations. The person behind the title, each one a participant in this narrative, resonated with him more profoundly than he had anticipated. But then, an unsettling challenge erupted. Outspoken members questioned the viability of his vision, dismissing it as an impractical daydream within the constraints of their existing structure. Hank's pulse quickened. He could feel the air in the room change. The fear clenched in his stomach threatened to unravel his hard-won momentum. "Are you prepared to make this commitment?" one developer shot back, forcing the ball into Hank's court. The room fell silent, all eyes trained on him, a testing ground laid bare. Fueled by conviction, Hank stepped forward. "Commitment," he echoed, feeling his voice pulse with purpose. "It's about sharing the responsibility for future generations. Are we okay with another lost opportunity?" Glimmers of tension hung in the air, waiting to ignite. Hank sensed the shift. This was his moment to cement a legacy or unravel under pressure. As the questions piled high, Hank realized the only path was to fully calibrate his resolve. This was an opportunity to reshape public consensus and redefine success within a rigid framework. Faced with profound doubt, he understood he had to dive deeper into this confrontation and challenge not just the developers, but his own capacity to lead. The clock ticked, the moment stretched. Would he display the courage to embrace the full force of his ambition? A deep breath grounded him once more as he prepared to confront the very heart of this complex question. Could he emerge from this workshop not just with their backing but transformed within? And there, in that charged atmosphere, he felt the pressure mount, foreshadowing the staggering realization of potential within him, the growing determination to rise against complacency. The next pivotal moment awaited just outside this gathering, one that would truly test his limits. The faces of the stakeholders seemed to blur momentarily as Hank locked in on the developer's penetrating gaze, challenging him silently to reconsider his skepticism. It was a standoff of sorts, and the uncertainty that accompanied it ignited something in Hank, a stubborn strength he didn't know he had. Commitment. The word echoed in his mind. It wasn't merely a term, it suddenly felt more like a pact, a shared vision that demanded trust. Realization dawned on him. If he could not convince them that the risk was worthwhile, there was little chance they would buy into the broader vision he had painstakingly crafted. He drew in a deep breath that grounded him in this turning point. "What if I told you," he began, his voice firm, "that true innovation often spins from an unwillingness to settle for the status quo? What if this isn't just about a project on paper, but a chance to redefine how we engage with the communities we serve?" Hank's words ignited a flicker of interest from a few of the previously bored faces. He could almost see the gears turning, questions morphing into curiosity instead of disdain. A subtle shift. This was his opening. "Let's break it down," Hank pressed on, feeling a surge of confidence with each word. He launched into a personal narrative, weaving the struggles he witnessed with community members into his professional ambitions. He spoke about partnerships born from mutual respect and shared aspirations, how each individual's investment could ripple outward, transforming lives. The atmosphere in the room began to shift as he shared his encounters with various stakeholders, emphasizing engagements that proved beneficial. "We need not be confined to our current parameters," he continued, watching as heads started to nod. "Instead of merely evaluating limitations, let's explore opportunities. The real question is, what legacy do we choose to build together?" People leaned forward, grappling with the potential of his words, and for the first time he saw sparking interest. As he continued, Hank sharpened his focus on his personal connection, recognizing their apprehensions and actively responding to them during discussions, turning cynicism into collaboration. For a moment he felt like the weight of the world was lifting. There was a new rhythm in the room, marked by excitement and the discovery of shared accountability. Stakeholders began to engage in discussions amongst themselves, flipping objections into constructive feedback. But then, another voice rose, piercing through the optimism. It was a senior developer, arms folded defiantly. "You talk about community change, but are you willing to analyze the metrics? All we've known are numbers." The skepticism in his tone curled like smoke, threatening to choke the progress. Metrics are vital, Hank conceded briskly, sensing his resolve tested again. But they are not the entire narrative. I propose we can create a new framework that blends qualitative impact with quantitative outcomes. Let's begin by measuring the stories and successes of individuals, how intervention truly changes lives. A ripple of conversation erupted, threading doubt with promise now. It seemed there were openings forming. Hank just needed to guide this energetic current toward a collective vision. But as people exchanged ideas, he felt the flicker of self-doubt clawing at him again. Was he truly prepared for this? Did he have the capability to usher in change on this scale? A spark ignited within him as he pushed aside lingering uncertainties. He realized that the questions and, yes, even the challenges weren't meant to thwart. They were signals of deeper engagement. Hank had the tools to navigate these complexities while asserting his conviction, leading others to explore uncharted terrains. As discussions came to a conclusion, a new undertone of camaraderie filled the room. They weren't merely stakeholders now, they were partners. And in that realization, Hank caught a glimpse of his purpose, the thread tying everything together. Transformation begins with courage, both personal and collective. The workshop ended, and while he felt spent, it was a satisfying exhaustion, a testament to the energy that had shifted from doubt into mutual respect. As he and May made their way out of the venue, the chill of the evening air hit him, invigorating his spirit. "Do you think they believed in it?" May asked softly, her eyes shining with hope. Hank smiled at her. "I think we've just begun to plant the seeds, but I need to dig deeper. I have to be ready for what comes next." That night, as he lay awake, his mind churned with ambitions, eclipsing doubt with visions of concrete plans. Tomorrow would bring new meetings, new challenges, and he was determined to meet them head-on. But as he prepared mentally for the days ahead, one daunting thought loomed larger than the rest. He would have to confront a significant antagonist, the very institution he hoped to influence. The time had come to face the unwritten rules of an entrenched system. Could he break through the rigid structures that held them all back? That challenge awaited just around the corner. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting stripes of light across Hank's cluttered desk. The warmth felt oddly soothing despite the anxiety bubbling beneath his skin. Today, the confrontation loomed large, a meeting with the institution he had both respected and feared. It was a tightrope walk. He needed to balance ambition with caution, hope with reality. Each step toward the office felt weighted with a mixture of trepidation and determination. What had seemed like an insurmountable wall of bureaucracy now felt like a series of doors waiting to be unlocked. As he sat in the conference room, surrounded by key decision-makers entrenched in the very norms he sought to challenge, Hank felt the familiar tension creep back in. They filed in wearing their customary expressions of skepticism, and as the conversations began to unfold, Hank quickly assessed their body language. He noted the rigid postures, the furrowed brows, the unmistakable defense mechanism of those resistant to change. It struck him how much of their apprehension stemmed from a fear of loss of control, loss of reputation, loss of certainty. Finally, as the agenda was laid forth, he saw his opportunity. "We are standing at a pivotal moment," Hank said, projecting his voice with conviction. "Innovation doesn't wait for permission. It demands proactive engagement. Together we can redefine metrics of success, not just as numbers but as narratives of change." Silence punctuated the room. He had their attention, but doubts lined their faces. A senior administrator scoffed dismissively. "Do you have any statistical evidence backing your claims? Stories don't pay the bills." Hank's heart raced. He had anticipated this challenge, but the force of it still felt like a jolt. "What if," he countered, staring unwaveringly into their skeptical eyes, "we begin to merge stories with data? What if each number represents a life shifted, a potential unlocked? Would that change your perspective on what contributes to our legacy?" The room's atmosphere shifted imperceptibly. He witnessed the faintest glimmer of intrigue breaking through the defenses, but a counter-argument was quick to materialize. A board member interjected, We can't abandon our foundational principles. We risk undermining our credibility. Hank leaned forward, feeling heat rise within him. But are our foundational principles equipped to handle the challenges we face today? Are they growing with us? Or are they anchoring us in a past that no longer serves us? He sensed a stir of dissent sprinkled with curiosity. Perhaps this was the point of engagement he needed. Adrenaline coursed through him as he built his case, articulating not just the urgency for change, but weaving in examples from his previous discussions. He illustrated evidence of successful transformations driven by organizations that dared to push boundaries. But just as he felt momentum building, a familiar question arose. "What's the plan, Hank? What are the first steps?" The inquiry came not as a challenge, but as a genuine search for direction. Hank took a deep breath, pausing to gather his thoughts. This moment was critical. Here lay the potential to shift from abstract discussions to actionable strategies. He outlined a step-by-step approach for initiatives grounded in both qualitative stories and quantitative outcomes, a hybrid model that could reshape their understanding of impact. As he spoke, Hank felt a flood of clarity. Ideas melded seamlessly into a plan, the exact blueprint these stakeholders needed to envision the real change. The energy in the room shifted again, heads nodding, murmurs of agreement trickling in. A recognition of shared responsibility began to replace skepticism, but even as he savored this fleeting victory, a darker shadow loomed in the corners of his mind. Was this enthusiasm real, or simply noise masking underlying resistance? The institution was vast and rooted deep. Changing its path wouldn't come without turbulent pushback. He needed to be cautious. Complacency stood as an ever-present threat. The meeting concluded with an uncommon sense of unity, but Hank felt his heart racing as he exited the room. Would they truly follow through on the plans they had envisioned together? Or would his ideas perish in the throes of institutional inertia? That nagging doubt, the foreboding of an unseen resistance, gnawed at him. Every ounce of momentum hinged on the next critical challenge, rekindling excitement beyond policy rooms and dissecting the core hesitations within the very institution he wanted to inspire. The real battle was just beginning. With that resolve, Hank knew he had to prepare, both professionally and personally, because as the clock ticked, the true weight of what was coming bore down on him like a storm on the horizon. Hank stepped out of the conference room, the clatter of applause fading behind him, and he felt a tidal wave of relief washing over him. But it was swiftly pursued by apprehension gnawing at his conscience. In the aftermath of the meeting, he was buoyed by the rhythm of tentative optimism, but the creeping reality that this was merely the beginning of a much more profound struggle prompted him to reassess his next steps. He knew he had devised a strategic vision worth pursuing, yet the details remained hazy. To illuminate the path ahead, he'd need to engage with the very individuals who had expressed hesitance. They were not only stakeholders, but allies in potential. Heltering under a veneer of experience and wisdom, he now needed to peel back their layers of skepticism, uncovering their personal stakes in this endeavor. A daunting task, but he felt the pulse of purpose zap through him in sparks of determination. Hank returned to his desk. The familiar chaos greeted him once again. Papers piled high, coffee stains hinting at late nights, a picture of his daughter smiling amidst the clutter. He thought of the future he wanted to sculpt for both her and the institution. With renewed resolve, he set about crafting a plan that involved direct engagement with these key players. He needed to transform them from passive observers into active participants. That evening, he labored over an outreach strategy, integrating personalized invitations for smaller roundtable discussions, informal affairs where concerns could be aired without the weight of formalities overwhelming. These could serve as breeding grounds for collaboration, a space to elicit their stories, fears, and ambitions. He wanted to see their humanity, not just their bureaucratic facades. As dawn broke the next day, he sent out the invites. His fingers danced across the keyboard with an exhilarating blend of anxiety and hope. Would they join him? Or would they remain tethered to the comfort of resistance? The reply was swift. The first wave of confirmations rolled in, heartening him. It struck him as odd, the way the shadows of fear that once smothered him began to wane. Each acknowledgement made him feel a little less alone. Yet, he found himself second-guessing his approach. What if they simply came to oppose? What if his outreach only deepened the divides he sought to bridge? While contemplating these questions, he stumbled upon the real battleground within him, a clash of confidence and vulnerability. He had been so focused on changing others, on challenging the perceptions of the institution, that he hadn't scrutinized the fears that could hinder his leadership. Derek, one of the more outspoken critics among the administrators, had often dismissed Hank's prior initiatives as idealistic fluff. Would he rise to Hank's call for deeper engagement or simply dismiss it as a ploy? Determined to confront this, Hank reflected on his own journey, the risks he had taken, the failures that could have derailed him, but didn't. He recalled how his daughter's laughter was often the compass guiding him through the fog of uncertainty. It was imperative now to channel that same spirit. Engaging Derek would not be merely about convincing but also about understanding his perspective. What drove him? What fears lurked behind his skepticism? Hank steeled himself for the task ahead, intending to extend his human overtures to everyone, to serve as a catalyst rather than a commander. He needed authenticity in his endeavors because this path was not merely about implementing change. It was about fostering understanding and trust. These roundtables would serve as grounding spaces where transformative ideas could sprout from shared narratives. The days leading to the first roundtable swirled around him with an intensity he had not yet experienced. Each conversation with the attendees, especially Derek, would be pivotal. Would this new approach render the skepticism less solid? Would they recognize the genuine intent behind his vision? As he readied himself to face the first discussions, the unsettling thought lingered. Would he muster the courage needed to face direct challenges, to not only weather opposition, but engage with it in the spirit of collaboration? For after all, confronting one's fears wasn't always about winning, it was about learning. With every passing hour, the question thrummed louder within him. Was he prepared to yield his supposed strength to the very people who had once resisted him? The clock ticked relentlessly, and Hank had no choice but to confront his imminent reality. An intermingling of promise and discomfort awaited him in the unfolding dialogues. What revelations would emerge from this gathering of minds? Would he discover allies in unexpected forms, or would this mark the onset of an even deeper struggle for acceptance and support? Hank stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie as he took one last look at his reflection. Today marked a turning point. The command of uncertainty lingered, but so did the charge of anticipation. The small round-table discussions he had envisioned were about to materialize, each dialogue a crucible, testing not only the strength of his vision but his readiness to embrace vulnerability in the face of critique. As he entered the room, the sun streamed through the large windows, illuminating the faces of the administrators gathered around the table. They varied in demeanor. Some appeared cautiously optimistic, while others maintained their skepticism as an impermeable shield. Yet Hank was determined. This wasn't merely a gathering for presentations but a platform for collective understanding. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady yet warm. "Today I want to create an open dialogue. Let's share thoughts, challenge ideas, and find common ground." Hesitation wrapped around the room like an unwelcome guest, but he pressed on, recalling the vulnerability he had recently learned to welcome. As conversations flowed, Hank listened intently to their perspectives, stories of past successes and failures intertwining to craft a rich tapestry of shared experiences. He could feel the wall slowly beginning to crack, revealing glimpses of their humanity. Derek, who previously scoffed at Hank's ideas, raised concerns about potential funding. "You talk about a community hub, but how do we ensure it's sustainable?" Hank took a deep breath. This was his chance to shift the narrative. "Sustainability doesn't just come from dollars," he replied, embracing a collaborative spirit. "It emerges from collaborative investment. When the community feels a stake in this project, they will support it far beyond financial contributions. Stories from residents, artists, and families can breathe life into this space, creating a cultural ecosystem that thrives organically." Surprisingly, Derek nodded, his expression shifting from resistance to the curiosity that lay beneath. Hours passed as they engaged in a dance, exploring possibilities and uncovering each other's aspirations. Hank used their feedback to refine his approach, adapting seamlessly to the flow of conversation. Each story exchanged felt like a thread weaving them tighter together. Barriers weakened, and newfound trust began to manifest. Finally, as the session drew to a close, a palpable sense of closeness enveloped the room. Hank addressed the group one more time, his heart racing with a profound realization. What we've started here isn't just about one project. We're forging a path towards a culture of understanding within our institution. Let's continue this journey and expand our dialogue. Derek stood, offering a hand to Hank. I appreciate your approach today, Hank. I think we can grow from this. Cheers erupted from the others, punctuated by laughter and ambitious ideas fluttering in the air. Hank's heart swelled with pride. He had navigated opposition, transformed it into collaboration, and witnessed a rebirth of community within these walls. The shadows that had cloaked his uncertainty began dissipating, revealing the solid foundation of connection they had built together. On the drive home, Hank felt a newfound sense of purpose and identity. A man who had once strived to isolate himself, only to now embrace connection and vulnerability. Each shift had sculpted him, stripping him of old doubts. No longer was he a mere observer of his life. He was an active participant, ready to facilitate change, to breathe life into the stories that defined them all. As he entered his home, his daughter raced toward him, her gleeful laughter melding into the fabric of his transformation. He scooped her up, spinning her around, the weight of responsibility feeling lighter than ever. "Dad, you're home," she exclaimed, the warmth of her affection wrapping around him like a protective cloak. "Yes, and let me tell you about the incredible day I had." He beamed, realizing that he had achieved not just a measure of professional growth, but an emotional renaissance. Hank looked forward, fueled by the knowledge that he could continue embracing change both within himself and as a catalyst for others. The path was set, and with it, an unwavering commitment to honor the shared narratives that would bring life into the spaces they aimed to protect. This was just the beginning, a promise igniting anew with every laugh, every conversation, a future where shadows of isolation had no place. And this was his moment to step fully into the light. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It really makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to spread the word. Don't wait even one more second to support us and become part of the community transforming lives.